Hello, my name is Ashley Comfort, and for my TSL Spotlight On final project, I decided to investigate preschool ELLs with an LD or DD, so with a learning disability or developmental delay. So the definition of my topic and why it's important is to focus on language acquisition in early childhood students and how students with disabilities acquire receptive and expressive language. In preschool, ESL students who have a disability are often overlooked for speech services because of their knowledge of their L1 and limited knowledge of their L2. So this is an important topic because it would help early childhood teachers who have ELL students with a disability and know how to implicate impactful learning strategies for those students. So for my objectives, after reading this PowerPoint, you should be able to define English language learner and learning disability, as well as developmental delay. Understand the process for identifying students who are ELL with an LD. Connect Krashen's theory to preschool students who are ELL. And understand learning strategies for preschool ELL students with an LD. So English language learners are students who are unable to communicate fluently or learn effectively in English, who often come from a non-English speaking home or background, and who typically require specialized or modified instruction in both the English language and in their academic courses. A learning disability is defined as a condition giving rise to difficulties in acquiring knowledge and skills to the level expected of those of typically developing peers. Developmental delay, this is the one that you'll see most in preschool because learning disability is not typically a label kids will receive until age 9 because there has to be evidence and discrepancy between IQ scores and academic performance. So developmental delay is the one that we'll most popular see in the preschool area. So developmental delay, defined by the IDEA, is a delay is defined as a slow to meet or not reaching milestones in one or more areas of development, and these include communication, motor, cognition, social emotional, or adaptive, which are those self-help skills. So learning in L2 in the preschool environment. So our text clearly states that by the time a child is 3, they've learned most of their sounds in their native language. So so when students who are preschool age 3 for students with a disability and 4 for students without a disability, when they come to school, they have already learned most of their first language unconsciously. So when they come to school, they're really focusing on that L2, which in our case is English. And again, our text says on average, children have mastered most of the distinctive sounds of their first language before they are 3 years old. So Krashen's theory, the acquisition learning theory, there was a distinction between the two, the acquisition and the learning phase. So according to Krashen, these are two different independent systems of performance. The acquired system is the product of subconscious process, or very similar to the process children undergo when they acquire their first language. It requires meaningful interaction in the target language, natural communication, in which speakers are concentrated not in the form of their utterances, but in the communicative act. So really applies to preschool because in preschool we have those open-ended conversations with students during their self-selected centers, and we try to use that time to be able to talk with the students and have that natural conversation going back and forth. So this acquisition phase really does apply to the preschool environment. So this is Stephen Krashen on language acquisition. I'm only going to play the first 5 minutes of this video because it really demonstrates the difference between the emphasis on the comprehensible input, and he shows the difference between his first lesson and his second lesson, which is used with visuals and is more understood by the audience.
To begin my presentation this afternoon by talking about what I think is the most important issue in language education, the most important question, and that is, how do we acquire language? And I'd like to begin this discussion, this presentation, with an outrageous statement. In my opinion, we all acquire language the same way. The reason this is an outrageous thing to say is that these days in education, we're living in an age of individual variation. We're very concerned about how our students are different, not how our students are the same. Those who've been around in the field for a while remember, about 15, 20 years ago, people were very concerned about something called field-dependent learners and field-independent learners. You give people a certain test and one group gets this treatment, one group gets the other. Then about 15 years ago it was left side of the brain, right side of the brain. Some people are left hemisphere thinkers, some people are right hemisphere. Then about 10 years ago, cognitive style. The cognitive style of the home culture differs from the cognitive style of the school culture. We have a clash, etc. Well, each of the examples I gave you is probably correct. There is individual variation, and there is quite a bit of it. Nevertheless, there are some things we all do the same. Let me give you some examples. Digestion. We all digest food the same, no significant individual variation. First you put it in your mouth, then you chew it up, then it goes down your throat, then into your stomach. That's how it's done everywhere. That's how it's done in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. That's how it's done everywhere in the world. The visual system's the same everywhere. It's always the occipital lobe in the back of the brain. It's never in the side of the brain. It's never in the front of the brain. It's never in the elbow. It's done exactly the same everywhere you go. By the way, I used to use sex as an example of things everyone does the same, but some counterexamples have been pointed out to me recently. Actually, I saw this movie, if you really want to know the truth. Anyway, we all acquire language the same, and rather than just talk about it, I'd like to show you. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and give you some sample language lessons. I'll use a language that I'm sure you've heard before, and maybe some of you speak, and you can tell me which of these two very brief lessons you like better. Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte im Voraus sagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. What do you think? Good lesson so far? Do you think if I kept talking to you like that, you'd pick up German? Not very likely. How about if I repeated it? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it louder? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it and you repeated it back? Again, I don't think that would help. How about if I wrote it out for you and you could see it on your television screen? That wouldn't help either. How about if I wrote it out for you and you copied it down? How about if I wrote it out for you and deleted every 5th word and you tried to guess what the word is? The truth is that none of these things help. None of these things mean anything, and I hope you can see that now. Here's lesson number 2. And for this, you have to watch me carefully. Das ist meine Hand. Verstehen Sie das? Hand? Everyone say, ja, I can hear you, even though it's a TV audience. Good. Kopf. Das ist mein Kopf. Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja? Gut. Kopf. And here I'll draw a picture now. Kopf. Ist gut, ja? Schön. Kopf. Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie Ohren? Er hat 2 Ohren. Okay, Mr. Spock. Ja? Ach, nein. Entschuldigung. Okay. Augen. Verstehen Sie Augen? Augen. Wie viele Augen? 1, 2, 3 Augen. 3 Augen. Ist das richtig? 3 Augen? Nein. Wir haben nur 2 Augen. Mund. Verstehen Sie Mund? Und hier ist eine Zigarette, ja? Nein. Zigaretten sind nicht gut. If you understood lesson number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach you German. And now I'm going to share with you the most important thing I have learned about language. Probably the best kept secret in the profession. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call
Okay, so comprehensible input. How does comprehensible input connect to preschool children? So students in the classroom are exposed to modeling, manipulatives, real objects, and visuals, making input of the L2 more impactful. Some steps for identifying an ELL student for an LD, but really a DD in the preschool environment. So the first step is to get some baseline data. So the teacher will do a screening, or a speech pathologist will do a screening. Usually it will be both, one for communication and one for cognitive, social, and adaptive, to see what and then the next step is to see what area the student is struggling in. It could be cognitive, social, adaptive, communication, motor, but really the teacher is able to implicate interventions for cognitive, social, and adaptive. If there are communication worries, then the speech language pathologist will give those teacher interventions for that student. The next step is to implicate those interventions with the student and see if they render any progress by the end of them. If there is no progress, the student will be evaluated by a team of professionals, usually a speech language pathologist if necessary, the special education teacher, or a coach of some sort. And the general education teacher usually gets to put in some feedback for that student, but usually does not is not part of the process necessarily, but they do get the results. So some effective learning strategies for ELLs with an LD, skills to help promote language in preschoolers. So provide explicit vocabulary, systematic instruction. Um, so children require multiple exposures to words in order to develop a rich understanding of their meaning and their use. So teachers should make a point of introducing interesting new words to children into each classroom activity. Ensure that ELLs have ample opportunities to talk with both adults and peers and provide ongoing feedback and encouragement. Expose ELLs to rich language input. Um, so whether this be through a shared book or teacher talk, and just providing the opportunities for those students to speak with other students in their classroom that English is their first language. So structure the classroom routine to provide scaffolding. This was a very interesting one for me. So arranging the classroom in a way that can support each type of instruction activity that will take place, and then keep changes to the physical environment to a minimum. Because once ELLs learn what activities take place in various parts of the classroom, such as center time or circle time or music and movement, once they pick up on the physical environment, will give them cues of what they are to do and how they are to behave in that area. And to encourage continued L1 language development. So strong L1 support in both languages in literacy, learning, and English. They could encourage parents to talk and read to their children in their home language as a way of strengthening their L1 language skills. And you can also incorporate children's home language in the classroom when possible. Songs and videos can be effectively used for this purpose if teachers do not speak the language. Effective strategies for ELLs with an LD. So some more of these. So skills to promote literacy in preschoolers. So alphabet knowledge is a big one that we work on. And we talked about having those cross-cultural components in languages. So it's very important to understand those when you are working with students who are ELL, because alphabet knowledge is sometimes one of those. Some languages have an alphabet just like ours, and so promoting those sounds and that phonological awareness is very, very important in the preschool environment. As well as print awareness, it makes them aware of the print in the environment and its purpose. And then I also have 3 classroom strategies for literacy. These are more for older grades, but it's still important as the kids move through their school years that they still get ELL and LD support um, for their IEP to meet their goals. This last video is 45 minutes long, so I will not play it, but it's a very good resource. This video is about students that are ELL but also LD, and they answer, some very important questions and go over, just answering questions for parents and different research and different things like that. So here are, oh, I'm sorry. I did not want to play that. So here are my references, and I thank you guys again for listening and hope that this was helpful in some way. Thank you again.